Please take a moment to simply close your eyes. Try to reach back through the decades and recall a very specific feeling from your youth. Perhaps it is the scorching heat of a galvanized metal playground slide on a July afternoon, or the unmistakable scent of powdered sulfur hanging in the air after firing a roll of paper caps. Welcome back to 1970s America. Today, we are going to explore 20 things we did as children that were completely normal back then, but today would leave modern parents in a state of absolute shock. We are talking about a time when childhood was an unscripted, wildly unsupervised adventure. We will walk you through these forgotten rituals one by one, feeling the textures and hearing the sounds of a lost era. And please make sure to stay with us until the very end, because the final memory we're going to share is perhaps the most profound reminder of the deep family bonds we used to share, right in the back of a wood-paneled station wagon. Before we dive into our memories, let us set the stage and remember what the world actually felt like back then. Time simply moved at a different pace in the 1970s. Without the constant interruption of cellular phones or the relentless stream of the internet, days felt beautifully long and stretched out. Waiting was a natural part of life. Whether you were waiting for your favorite song to play on the crackling AM radio, or waiting for your best friend to finally knock on your front door, there is a modern myth that without today's advanced technology, our lives must have been somehow emptier or emotionally poorer. But you and I know the exact opposite is true. Our lives were infinitely richer because they were grounded in raw, unfiltered reality. We learned resilience by falling down and scraping our knees. We learned conflict resolution by arguing over the rules of a street game without an adult mediating every single word. Our emotional bank accounts were filled with genuine human connections, eye contact, and a profound sense of community trust that allowed us to roam free. The lack of modern safety nets did not make us fragile. It made us beautifully, wonderfully alive. Let us remember exactly how we lived. Let us take a walk down memory lane and start with a taste that every single child of the 1970s knows intimately. We are talking about the unmistakable, slightly metallic flavor of water flowing straight from the green garden hose. Do you remember the sheer heat of those long summer afternoons? The sun would beat down on the pavement, making the air shimmer and dance. When thirst finally caught up with you after hours of playing tag or riding bicycles, you did not go inside to bother your mother for a glass of filtered ice water. Instead, you found the nearest hose coiled by the side of the house. You would turn the rusty metal spigot, waiting patiently for the sun-baked, scalding hot water to flush out. Once the stream turned gloriously ice cold, you leaned over, letting the water splash all over your chin and your sweat-soaked T-shirt. It tasted of heavy rubber, rich earth, and absolute freedom. There were no disposable plastic water bottles and absolutely no worries about bacteria or unfiltered tap water. It was just you, your neighborhood friends taking turns, and the simple, unadulterated joy of quenching your thirst right there in the yard before sprinting back into the game. And now let us remember the exhilarating rush of riding in the open bed of a pickup truck. Today, the very idea of letting children sit untethered in the back of a moving vehicle would result in a massive fine. But back in our day, it was the ultimate VIP seating for any trip across town. Picture yourself sitting on the burning hot metal wheel wells, the wind whipping fiercely through your hair and making your eyes water. You and your siblings would bounce completely airborne every time your father hit a pothole or took a sharp turn. You would wave enthusiastically at the drivers in the cars behind you, feeling like absolute royalty on your way to the local hardware store or the neighborhood drive-in theater. There were no seatbelts, no padded seats, and no safety concerns running through anyone's mind. The truck bed was our glorious metal playpen on wheels. It taught us balance, it taught us how to hold on tight, and it gave us an incredible, unobstructed view of the American landscape rolling by. It was a wildly dangerous thrill by today's standards, but to us, it was simply the best way to travel on a hot summer evening. Think back to the universal curfew of our childhood, the flickering glow of the neighborhood streetlights. In the 1970s, parents did not track our every move with a digital device. The golden rule was simple and unbreakable. You go out and play, and you come back home the exact moment the streetlights come on. Do you recall the magical transition from the golden hour of late afternoon to the cool dusk? The sound of crickets would slowly begin to rise, and the heavy summer heat would finally break. You would be deep in a game of kick the can or hiding in the neighbor's bushes. Then you would hear that familiar low electrical buzz as the tall sodium vapor lamps began to flicker on, casting an orange glow over the asphalt. Suddenly, the entire neighborhood would echo with the voices of mothers standing on their front porches, calling out the names of their children into the twilight. You would run home exhausted, with dirty knees and a full heart. That streetlight was our ultimate timekeeper, a symbol of the profound trust our parents had in us and the immense freedom we had to explore our small corners of the world until the very last drop of daylight faded away. Let us turn our minds to the backyard barbecues and the heavy, terrifying weight of lawn darts. We all remember those long holiday weekends, the smell of charcoal smoke mixing with the scent of grilled hot dogs and homemade potato salad. While the adults were sitting on aluminum folding chairs, drinking iced tea and talking, the children were handed literal weapons to play with. Lawn darts, or jarts, were massive, heavy metal spikes adorned with colorful plastic fins. The goal was to lob them high into the sky and have them land perfectly inside a plastic ring on the grass. You would watch in awe and slight terror as that heavy metal projectile arched gracefully through the air, completely at the mercy of the wind. We all had to develop the quick reflexes to scatter and dodge out of the way before it plummeted to the earth, sinking deep into the lawn. Looking back, the sheer absurdity of giving heavy, sharp metal projectiles to unsupervised children at a crowded family gathering is mind-boggling. Yet, we survived. We learned spatial awareness, we learned to pay attention to our surroundings, and we enjoyed the thrilling danger of a truly unforgettable backyard game. Do you recall the profound sense of independence that came with your very first bicycle? In the 1970s, bicycles were not just toys. They were our primary mode of transportation and our tickets to absolute freedom. We rode gleaming machines with sparkling vinyl banana seats and tall, sweeping ape-hanger handlebars. We would attach baseball cards to the spokes with wooden clothespins, creating a wonderful rattling motor sound as we pedaled furiously down the street. And, of course, There was not a single bicycle helmet in sight. You rode with the wind rushing past your bare head, feeling completely invincible. We would build questionable wooden ramps out of scrap lumber and cinder blocks, attempting daredevil jumps that inevitably ended in spectacular crashes. Your knees were perpetually covered in scrapes, painted with bright red mercurochrome that stung like fire. We rode miles away from home, crossing major intersections and exploring adjacent towns, completely off the grid. That bicycle taught us self-reliance, basic mechanics when the chain fell off, and the sweet, unparalleled taste of unrestricted mobility. Let us take a trip down to the local neighborhood park and look at the playground equipment that built our character. Modern playgrounds are covered in soft, bouncy rubber and rounded plastic edges. But our playgrounds were glorious, towering monuments of galvanized steel set directly over unyielding, rock-hard asphalt. Do you remember the searing heat of a metal slide in the middle of July? It was basically a frying pan. We would bring pieces of wax paper from home to sit on, polishing the metal as we slid down to achieve terrifying, uncontrollable speeds. We climbed massive, towering jungle gyms shaped like rocket ships, where a single slip meant a heavy fall onto the blacktop. We spun on heavy metal merry-go-rounds, pushing them so fast that centrifugal force practically threw us into the dirt. We survived pinched fingers, bruised shins, and the occasional cracked tooth. Those dangerous playgrounds were not just places to play, they were proving grounds. They taught us how to assess risk, how to hold on tight, and how to get right back up after taking a hard fall. It was an environment that naturally bred resilience and physical confidence in a way that modern safety simply cannot replicate. Now let us take a stroll down to the neighborhood corner store with a few shiny coins jingling heavily in your pocket. Do you remember what you were going to buy? It was something that today would cause an absolute uproar, but back then it was just another sweet treat. We are talking about candy cigarettes and bubblegum cigars. You would hand your dimes to the cashier and walk out with a little cardboard pack that looked exactly like the ones your father or your uncle carried in their shirt pockets. You and your friends would stand on the corner, leaning against the brick wall, holding the sugary white sticks between your index and middle fingers. If you blew through them just right, a little puff of powdered sugar would float into the air, perfectly mimicking a cloud of smoke. You felt incredibly sophisticated, acting out the rituals of adulthood that you saw everywhere around you. There was no malice in it, just a naive imitation of the grown-up world. The candy itself was chalky and sweet, and the bubblegum cigars were so thick they made your jaw ache. Looking back, the very concept of marketing smoking to children through candy seems utterly surreal and completely absurd. Let us step inside the heavy steel doors of the family car and remember a legendary safety feature that was entirely human. Before the days of mandatory seatbelt laws, booster seats, and passenger airbags, there was only one line of defense in the front seat of a Plymouth or Ford station wagon. We are talking about the famous mother seatbelt. Picture this. You are sitting right in the middle of the wide, sticky vinyl bench seat. The radio is playing a soft tune, and the windows are rolled down to let the breeze in. Suddenly, the car in front of you stops abruptly. Before you even have time to register the squeal of the brakes, your mother's right arm shoots across your chest with lightning speed, pinning you safely against the back of the seat. It was a completely instinctive reflex, an act of pure, unthinking love and protection. That arm possessed a superhuman strength in those moments. It did not matter if she was holding a purse, shifting gears, or completely distracted in conversation, that arm was always there to catch you. Today, the idea of letting a small child ride up front with absolutely no restraints is unthinkable. But back then, that firm grip across your collarbone was all the security we ever needed. Speaking of those long car rides, we must talk about a sensory detail that is permanently etched into the memories of our generation. We are talking about the ever-present thick haze of secondhand smoke. In the 1970s, smoking was simply a part of the background scenery of life. It happened in restaurants, in grocery stores, in airplanes, and most notably, inside the family car. Do you remember riding in the back seat on a cold winter night with all the windows tightly rolled up to keep the freezing air out? Your parents would light up their favorite brand, and soon the entire cabin would be filled with a dense, swirling cloud of blue smoke. You could watch the glowing cherry of the cigarette ash illuminating the dark interior. The scent of tobacco was deeply woven into the very fabric of our heavy winter coats, our hair, and the car upholstery itself. It was such a common reality that we barely even noticed it, let alone complained about it. It was simply the smell of adulthood, the scent of a road trip. Today, subjecting children to an enclosed space filled with smoke is universally condemned, but back then it was just the atmosphere we lived and breathed. While we are on the topic of the corner store, let us remember the immense grown-up responsibility of being sent on a very specific errand. Do you remember walking to the local grocer, holding a crumpled, hastily scribbled piece of notebook paper? On that paper was a note from your father or mother giving the store owner permission to sell you a pack of actual cigarettes. You would walk up to the heavy wooden counter, barely tall enough to see over it, and proudly hand over the note along with a crisp $1 bill. The grocer, who knew your entire family by name, would simply nod, take the money, and hand a young child a pack of unfiltered smokes and a book of matches. You would walk back home carrying the pack, feeling an incredible surge of pride. You were entrusted with a deeply adult task, handling money and interacting with the world of grown-ups all on your own. It was a profound demonstration of the trust that existed within tight-knit communities. The neighborhood watched out for its own, and children were treated as capable members of the household, expected to contribute to the daily chores, even if those chores seem wildly inappropriate by today's strict standards. Let us bring back the deafening rhythmic sound that echoed through every single neighborhood during the height of the craze. Clackers. If you grew up in the 70s, your wrists and forearms probably still carry the phantom memories of those deep purple bruises. Clackers were incredibly simple, just two heavy, solid acrylic spheres attached to a sturdy piece of string with a ring in the middle. The goal was to bounce them together, starting slow and building up speed until they were smashing into each other above and below your hand in a blindingly fast, ear-piercing rhythm. The noise was absolutely tremendous, a sharp cracking sound that drove parents completely crazy. But the true absurdity lay in the danger. Those heavy acrylic balls were notorious for shattering under the immense force of the repeated impacts, sending sharp plastic shrapnel flying in all directions. Despite the clear and present danger of exploding toys, we were absolutely obsessed with mastering the rhythm. We pushed through the pain of a misplaced strike hitting our knuckles, determined to keep the clackers going longer than our friends. It was a toy that required dedication, high pain tolerance, and nerves of steel. Now close your eyes and recall the sharp, pungent smell of sulfur hanging heavily in the humid summer air. It is the undeniable scent of childhood warfare. We are talking about cap guns and those tiny, tightly wound red paper rolls of gunpowder. In our youth, playing cowboys and robbers was a serious daily occupation. We carried heavy, die-cast metal revolvers that looked incredibly realistic. You would meticulously load the paper roll into the chamber, feeling the cold metal in your hands. Then came the glorious sound, a sharp, loud crack, accompanied by a tiny spark of actual fire and a wisp of gray smoke. Sometimes you did not even need the gun. We would place the entire roll of caps on the concrete sidewalk and smash it with a heavy rock, creating a massive, ear-ringing explosion that would leave a dark scorch mark on the pavement. Your ears would be ringing for hours afterwards. Today, bringing a realistic-looking metal gun to a public park and setting off miniature explosives would trigger an immediate emergency response. But for us, it was the soundtrack of summer, a harmless exercise of imagination and a way to live out the heroic tales we watched on our black and white television sets. Let us move indoors, straight into the heart of the kitchen, and remember a magical, yet slightly perilous, culinary toy. For the aspiring bakers among us, there was nothing quite like the Easy Bake Oven. It was a beautifully designed, brightly colored plastic appliance that promised independence in the kitchen. But the truly absurd part was how it actually worked. You were baking a remarkably dense, overly sweet chocolate cake using nothing but the blazing, unshielded heat of a standard 100-watt incandescent light bulb. Do you remember carefully pushing the tiny metal pan through the narrow slot, using that little plastic pusher? The heat radiating from inside that plastic box was genuinely intense. If your finger accidentally brushed against the hot metal pan or the internal housing, you were guaranteed a nasty burn. And yet, we waited with agonizing patience for our culinary masterpieces to cook. Half the time, the center of the cake was completely raw, and the edges were burnt to a crisp. But we ate every single bite with immense pride, entirely oblivious to the fire hazard sitting right there on our bedroom floor. Think back to the solemn, quiet responsibility of wandering the nearby woods with a cold piece of steel resting on your shoulder. For many children growing up in the 1970s, turning 12 meant receiving your very first air rifle, usually a classic lever-action Daisy BB gun. We would leave the house early on a Saturday morning, trekking out into the brush behind the housing development with pockets full of shiny copper pellets. We would spend hours setting up empty soup cans and rusted tin cans on a fallen log, taking turns aiming down the iron sights. It required patience, stillness, and a steady hand. There were no adults hovering over us, guiding our every move. We were trusted to handle what was essentially a real weapon with respect and care. We learned gun safety not from a formal class, but from older brothers and the solemn understanding that this was not a toy to be pointed at people. The freedom to roam the untamed patches of nature armed and completely independent fostered a deep sense of maturity and self-reliance that modern, highly structured childhoods rarely allow. Let us stay in the kitchen for just a moment longer and remember the ultimate sweet reward of a weekend afternoon. The house is filled with the warm, comforting aroma of vanilla extract and melting butter. Your mother is standing at the counter, finishing up a batch of homemade chocolate cake or thick brownie batter. The loud, mechanical whine of the heavy metal hand mixer finally powers down, and then the moment you have been waiting for. She pops the metal beaters out of the machine and hands them directly to you. They are thickly coated in rich, raw, egg-filled batter. You would sit on a wooden step stool and lick those beaters clean, savoring every sugary, gooey bite. In the 1970s, the fear of salmonella or foodborne illnesses from consuming raw eggs was practically non-existent in the family kitchen. No one worried about cross-contamination or strict food safety guidelines in their own homes. It was a pure, innocent indulgence, an unspoken bond between parent and child, and a delicious rite of passage that made the anticipation of the actual baked cake even sweeter. Do you recall the intense tropical aroma of baby oil and coconut baking under the unforgiving July sun? Summer skin care in the 1970s was the absolute, literal opposite of what dermatologists recommend today. Sunscreen was practically unheard of. Instead, the ultimate goal was to achieve the deepest, darkest tan physically possible. We would lie out on the driveway or the back patio on those low aluminum folding chairs with the woven plastic webbing that left a permanent waffle pattern on your thighs. We slathered our skin in thick, greasy baby oil mixed with iodine to accelerate the burning process. Some teenagers even held tri-fold cardboard reflectors covered in aluminum foil directly beneath their chins to catch maximum ultraviolet rays. We would bake for hours, rotating like rotisserie chickens. The inevitable result was, of course, agonizing bright red sunburns. You would spend the next 3 days shivering in pain, wrapped in a cold towel, while your mother applied sticky, bright green aloe vera gel to your peeling back. It was an incredibly painful cycle of burning and peeling, yet we repeated it every single summer without a second thought. Let us think about the older teenagers and a surprisingly common everyday practice that has completely vanished from modern society. We are talking about the casual nature of hitchhiking. In the 70s, if you did not have a car and you needed to get to the beach, the mall, or the next town over, you simply walked to the shoulder of a busy road and stuck your thumb out confidently into the wind. It was remarkably normal. You would eventually get picked up by a total stranger, perhaps a traveling salesman in a wide sedan or a local farmer in a dusty pickup truck. You would slide onto the front bench seat, roll the window down, and share a conversation with someone you had never met before and would likely never see again. The profound level of societal trust required for this to be a common practice is staggering by today's standards. Of course, there were risks, but the overarching belief was that most people were fundamentally decent and willing to help a kid out. That shared communal trust in strangers has slowly eroded away, leaving behind a world that is safer, but perhaps a little more isolated and suspicious. Now let us travel to the crisp, chilly autumn nights and the wild, unrestricted freedom of Halloween. The air smelled beautifully of burning wood smoke and damp, fallen leaves. Our costumes were not soft, comfortable fabrics. They were incredibly cheap, highly flammable plastic smocks that ripped easily, accompanied by rigid plastic masks. Do you remember the sharp rubber band of the mask pulling at your hair, and the way your own breath would condense and sweat on the inside of the plastic as you breathed through a tiny mouth hole? But the most remarkable part was the trick or treating itself. We did not walk just one block with our parents holding our hands. We roamed the streets in giant packs of kids, entirely unsupervised, walking miles away from our own homes into the pitch-dark night. We carried heavy, overstuffed pillowcases full of full-sized candy bars and homemade treats given out by neighbors. We navigated the darkness with cheap, dim flashlights that barely worked. It was a thrilling, spooky adventure where the neighborhood truly belonged to the children for one magical, chaotic night of the year. Let us remember the acrid, smoky scent that drifted across the backyards on a lazy weekend afternoon. It was the smell of the neighborhood incinerator or the backyard burn barrel. In many parts of America during the 1970s, garbage day meant taking things out to the yard and setting them on fire. Families would keep a large, rusty, perforated metal 50-gallon drum near the back fence. You would carry out cardboard boxes, junk mail, and daily newspapers, toss them into the barrel, and strike a match. As a child, you were often given the task of tending the fire. You would find a long, sturdy wooden stick and poke at the glowing embers to keep the flames fed with oxygen. You would stand there, mesmerized by the dancing orange flames and the floating, glowing flakes of ash rising into the twilight sky. Your clothes would smell like a campfire for days. Managing open flames in a residential area as a regular household chore seems incredibly hazardous now, but back then it was just another way we interacted intimately with the raw elements of life, learning fire safety through direct, hands-on experience. Finally, let us return one last time to the magnificent family station wagon, specifically the glorious rear-facing third row. We called it the way back. This was the ultimate domain of the children during any long cross-country road trip. You were seated backwards, watching the asphalt disappear beneath you, completely physically separated from the adults in the front. You would make funny faces at the drivers in the cars trailing behind you, trying to get them to laugh or honk their horns. The sun would beat down through that large, sloped rear window, baking the vinyl seats until they were hot to the touch. You would tumble around over suitcases, sleeping bags, and coolers, fighting with your siblings and inventing endless games to pass the miles. There were no video screens, no headphones, just the rhythmic thumping of the highway tires and the vast expanse of the American landscape rolling away in reverse. That space, dangerous and unbuckled as it was, fostered an absolute, unbreakable sense of family closeness. We were all trapped in that metal boat together, sharing the heat, the boredom, and the profound, beautiful journey of growing up. When we look back at these 20 memories, it is easy for modern eyes to see only the danger and the absurdity. But we know the deeper truth. We do not actually miss the heavy metal lawn darts or the lack of seatbelts. What we truly mourn is the feeling of that era. We miss the profound trust our parents had in us, the unhurried pace of a summer afternoon, and the deep, unbreakable connection we had with our neighbors and our friends. We miss a time when life was lived out loud, in the streets, with scraped knees and full hearts. Thank you so much for taking this nostalgic journey back to the 1970s with me today. If these memories brought a smile to your face, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. It truly helps us keep history alive. And now, I want to hear from you. What was the absolute craziest thing you did for fun as a child that would be completely illegal or forbidden today? Please share your personal stories in the comment section below. I cannot wait to read every single one of them.